Here are a couple of reasons why you might wish to subscribe to my video channel. One, because I bring 30 years of hardcore experience helping manage complex cross-cultural conflict in many parts of the world. Two, because I have a master's degree in critical and creative thinking, which doesn't mean very much, except for the fact that I have also been teaching people for more than 35 years how to improve their thinking capabilities. By thinking capabilities, I mean not just critical thinking, but also creative thinking. Three, because I've studied and I'm intimately familiar not just with the East and the West, but also the Arab world. How these three critical regions of the world interact will determine the kind of lives our children and grandchildren will live. Four, because I have absolutely no ideological or political agenda. My only agenda is to seek to understand and communicate how the world works. In other words, over the last 15 to 20 years, I have been teaching people how to understand human systems. Human systems such as nation states, societies, families, and organizations. Five, my passion is reality and how we can thrive within it. In fact, from me, you will hear the unvarnished truth, even if it works against my own preferences and desires. Today's talk is about the joys and agonies of trying to be a critical thinker, trying to be a holistic thinker. Teaching critical and creative thinking and mediating conflicts for a living has allowed me to spend countless hours embedded in other people's minds. This intimacy helped me appreciate the complex ways in which people gather and process information, interpret this information, reach conclusions, and make vital decisions. It has also allowed me to vicariously immerse myself in other people's feelings, aspirations, and anxieties, sometimes to the detriment of my own life and relationships. A lifetime of being a visitor in other people's minds has forced me to rethink everything I know about other people and myself. Most of all, it has changed my understanding of thinking itself. Hence, these essays, video essays, are not a neuroscientist treatise on the workings of the brain as much as they are a user's celebration of the human mind. I hope to capture at least a fraction of the exquisite challenges and joys that are there for our taking, if we are so inclined. The late Richard Paul, the doyen of the critical thinking field, once said, critical thinking is thinking about your thinking while you're thinking to make your thinking better. In other words, it is thinking in real time. I first wrote a draft of this essay in January of 2017 when I landed in Washington, D.C. after a 12-year stint in India. Coming from a chaotic nation fast descending into despotic illiberalism, I now watched helplessly as a far more developed one unraveled. Denied their first female president, many Americans were already in a deep funk, made worse by the daily bouts of logorrhea, verbal diarrhea, emanating from the White House. Anxiety and fear morphed into anger as personal relationships were strained and hair trigger sensitivities littered the civic space with landmines. Worse, my own peers in the democracy, diversity, and peace building fields ditched their commitment to neutrality and suddenly discovered the virtues of angry protest and resistance. In fact, they bent backwards to appease every insurgent group that demanded that we dismantle the oppressive system. The very same oppressive system I might add, that protected their own rights to attack their leaders, loot stores, and burn down neighborhoods. In the midst of this, peace builders and mediators, my own tribe, stayed loyal to their tired tools and theories, despite the fact that these had already proved to be wholly irrelevant to the changes taking place in the liberal world order. Perhaps I should have mentioned peace building, diversity, pluralism, and democracy are highly aspirational systems or ideals that can exist only within a robust, strong liberal world order. Most people in these fields, those who are fortunate enough to have jobs or funding, acted as though they could best serve democracy and peace itself by clinging on to their careers. While the Indian professional class, one that I had always precariously clung on to, had always been oblivious of their civic responsibilities, I was shocked to see the politically astute in the USA abdicating theirs. Years of self-flagellation about race, gender, sexuality, and a year of Trump derangement seem to have caused an epileptic quake of Vesuvian proportions that buried the national IQ, sinking it to moronic levels. Never before, I may exaggerate, but not by much, has a society's collective intelligence been dumbed down as quickly or as effectively. In this multi-part essay, in fact, in these videos, I intend to explore the hidden underbelly of thinking and the tragic consequences of poor thinking. I will make an honest effort to not dwell on some topics like race, gender, sexuality, or Trump, because personal research has shown me that the mere mention of even one of them turns well-meaning, intelligent humans into blabbering fools. Coming of age in the India of the late 70s, I was inspired by visions of freedom and rebellion. Like millions of my far more fortunate counterparts in the West, I too was besotted with music, free love, equal rights, and overthrowing the military-industrial complex. Why not? All the cool people were doing it. Unlike sensible folks who naturally outgrew their teenage fantasies, I stumbled into adulthood even more entrenched in mine and determined to help create the perfect world. This is not the place for me to chronicle my quixotic misadventures, except to say that in my 30s, wanting to improve the quality of public thinking in India, and particularly the city I lived in, Bangalore, I started a non-profit venture called Alternatives. My mission? To teach critical and creative thinking. That I didn't get run out of the city is a testament to the epic tolerance of Indians. If anything, my experiences were mostly positive and led me to believe that given congenial conditions and enlightened education, most individuals become not just brilliant, but even virtuous and wise. From this assumption, it then followed that if a critical mass of people were thus educated, entire societies could become, well, enlightened. I was not alone in harboring these ideals. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, philosophers and educators like John Dewey were unabashed about the prospects of creating a rational, creative, and compassionate world. After all, the intellectual fervor that heralded the Enlightenment and separated the church from state had liberated us from the constraints of custom, dogma, and societal oppression. The scientific revolution and the advances in political freedoms had also made it possible to imagine the emergence of a new kind of human, one who could train her mind to transcend not just her ego and baser emotions, but social and biological limitations. In my own classes, I had seen distinctly average or even dull students develop their powers of reasoning and imagination in astonishing ways, very often surprising even themselves. Naturally enough, this interest in critical and creative thinking converted me into a passionate, and I regret to say, sometimes aggressive supporter of free speech and free thought. To that end, I viewed the development of liberal, secular, democratic political system and the expansion of universal human rights as critical to our evolution as a species. Over the years, even when I discovered that liberal systems and institutions were often clumsy, easily corrupted, and eminently fallible, I kept my faith. I told myself that evolution was a slow process and that even if the 20th century was far from perfect, things were moving in the right direction. The America I had lived in from 1995 to 2005 still held out hope that all people everywhere, men and women, colonized and colonizer, gay and straight, black, brown, and white, could strive for a more fair, dignified, and brighter existence. This optimism was not a turn of the century thing, and it was certainly not just American. Take the matter of India's infamous caste system, which I learned about at the age of 10 or 11 in my social studies class. My elders in the family and at school, while not particularly progressive themselves, were liberal enough to see caste for the abomination that it was. They reassured us, kids, that by the time we grew up, this accursed system would disappear, the way of the kerosene lamp and bullet. Yes, we were once optimistic about human perfectibility. Few of us are that naive anymore. Today, leaving aside the crass and greedy, the sociopaths or the vacuous, even those who self identify themselves as moral, hide their enlightenment well. We had always been conscious of the evangelical rights hypocrisies. Alas, today, the cultural and political left have bested even the fundamentalists. They have made tribalism, egocentricity, and hatred, particularly when directed at the enemy, respectable again. Seduced by righteousness and criminally ignorant of humanity's painfully derived lessons, they have squandered their considerable energies on increasingly indulgent whims. This essay, then, is not a critique of the usual suspects, the elites, the dictators, the oligarchs, and the misogynists. It's easy to hate them. This, my friends, is my rant against ordinary people, people like you and me, who happen to have the good fortune of living in democracies. We have allowed our own biases and prejudices and lethargy destroy our ability to create a more humane world. Call it my last stand against willful ignorance, intellectual lethargy, and wanton idiocy. Unlike 10 or 15 years ago, when my warnings about the weakening of democracy elicited scorns, now even starry-eyed Pollyanna speak the language of imminent collapse. And yet, many continue to believe in magical thinking, to hold out hope in the form of another Messiah. Alas, there will be no Gandhi, Mandela, Roosevelt, not even another hapless Obama to save us with his soul-stirring rhetoric. We will not be delivered from tyranny, anarchy, or oblivion by saviors who have one eye on clicks, funding, or peace prizes. So here is my first boring and early obvious idea. A government of the people, by the people, and for the people is utterly dependent upon, wait for it, the people. That's it. We can't count on leaders. We can't count on big businesses. We can't count on civil society. We can't count on religious leaders to save us. We have to save ourselves. And the way to do it is not through anger, hatred, protest, and resistance. Watch my videos, read my essays, and join my courses to understand how we can do this. Thank you.